This is a review of The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey Chronicles, Creatures and Characters. So like I mentioned in the review for the first Hobbit Chronicles book, each of the 3 Hobbit movies receive 2 of these books. The first one, Art and Design, is predictably the art book, and the second volume, such as the one we're going through now, is more of what you would call the making of book. And in just the same way that the first volume was sort of a king amongst art books, this second volume is the exact same thing for making of books. Now, each of the 3 movies also has another sort of behind the scenes book called the movie guides, but I'll review those later. Those ones are sort of your more typical making of book. What I particularly love about the making of books for the Hobbit Chronicle series is it's probably one of the best insights into the sort of craft and artistry that goes into how the things you see on screen are made. And just like in the first book, pretty much all of the text is made up from direct commentary from the people who worked on the movie, and it's really, really excellent. There's just such a fantastic exploration of things like sculpting maquettes, hair and makeup, costuming, and especially the sort of like creation and application of prosthetics. It's just so amazing to see the amount of work and talent that goes into creating these things that you don't really notice when you're watching the movie. In this book, it really gives quite a detailed examination of each of the dwarves in the party, and at times I was kind of a bit like, this is so boring, I can't keep reading about these dwarves. But the thing is, it actually really is good information and cultivates much more of an appreciation. Like, I've read The Hobbit many times and I'd seen the movies a couple of times, but except for like Thorin and Bomba, I really couldn't match the names of the dwarves to their on-screen character. But after watching the behind-the-scenes appendices and reading these books, now I know exactly who's who. I can match the name to the character and the actor to the character, and really now see them as individuals. Because the thing is, even though these movies are, super long, the dwarves individually, except for Thorin, don't really have any sort of character development or exploration, really. They have their little introduction when they first show up at Bag End, but they don't really have like a sort of like Ocean's 13, I guess, sort of like, I'm the heavy weapons expert, I'm the healer, I'm the explosives guy, that kind of thing. But the filmmakers and the cast really did have individual deep backstories and roles for each of these dwarves to fill, and this book really helps sort of break that down and explain that, so that when I went back and watched the films recently, you could actually see like little things that the dwarves are doing in the background, or little pieces of equipment or things like that they are in fact not just a bunch of generic dwarves, but really were crafted characters. Now, of course, you shouldn't have to read a book or anything like that to understand that. The movie should be able to make that clear on its own. Whether it does or not is, of course, debatable, but these books and the behind-the-scenes appendices really helped cultivate an acknowledgement of that, and in turn did make the movie much more enjoyable to watch the second time. So my only criticism, and pretty much my only criticism for this entire series of Hobbit Chronicles, is the imagery in this book. The number of stills from the movie is ridiculous. Now, there are a bunch of really fantastic behind-the-scenes photos as well, but the number of stills from the movie, the number of really large stills that take up pages in this book, is really quite annoying, especially because, as I talked about in the art book, it contains over 1,000 pieces of art, and in an attempt to be able to fit all of those within the book, they have to make some of them quite small. And so it really annoys me that they've got one book that has so many pieces of art that they have to make some of them very small, but then they've got this second book where space is taken up by these huge photos of stills from the movie. And so that really annoys me, because it's like, I know they're trying to keep all of the art in one book, but I think it would have been a much smarter idea to spread that out a little bit and bring some of that art over into this book. That way you could reproduce it much larger and get rid of all of these stills. I mean, it's really not that big of a deal. You know how when something is sort of so close to perfect that even a little mistake is suddenly a lot more glaring by comparison. And also another really tiny thing of note is that there is a difference between the US version and the UK version. I can't really show you because I've got the UK version here, but on the cover for the US editions for these Chronicles, it actually has Roman numerals on the cover, sort of numbering the books, which is of course a very tiny little detail, but I really did like that the US editions numbered the books, because the titles are quite long and complicated and confusing, so that really just helped sort of keep everything in order. But on the whole, just a fantastic companion to the first book, and indeed a fantastic companion to all of the behind-the-scenes materials they've put out for these movies, that I give my highest recommendation for, as, like I said, this series really is some of the best art and making of books you will ever read.